Welcome back to the Growl with Hank, Episode 3. I am your host, Hank Brewski, and if you are here for the first time, pull up a chair. We keep it simple around here. If you have been with us since the beginning, you already know the deal. Coffee, truth, no fluff. Let us get to work. This week might be the biggest week we have had since this show started, and I am not exaggerating. 8 million Americans took to the streets on Saturday. Oil just hit $116 a barrel. Gas is about to cross $4 a gallon, and analysts are saying it could hit $7 by summer. Bank of America just paid $72 million to Jeffrey Epstein survivors, and the president said he wants to, quote, take the oil in Iran. That is a lot, but that is what the Bears Brew is for. I am going to break down every single one of these stories so you can walk away knowing exactly what happened, why it matters, and what it means for you. Ready? Let us go. Saturday, March 28th. Over 3,300 protests across all 50 states, over a dozen countries around the world, and an estimated 8 million people marching under the banner, No Kings. Organizers say it was the largest single day of protests in American history. Let that sink in. Not the largest this year, not the largest this decade, the largest ever. The flagship rally was in St. Paul, Minnesota. Somewhere between 100,000 and 200,000 people showed up at the state capitol. Bruce Springsteen performed a song he wrote called Streets of Minneapolis in honor of 2 people who were killed by federal immigration agents in January. Bernie Sanders spoke. Joan Baez was there. Jane Fonda was there. It looked like a concert and a political rally had a baby. In New York, tens of thousands marched across all 5 boroughs. The NYPD said they made 0 protest-related arrests. 0. In a city that cannot agree on pizza toppings, they somehow pulled off a peaceful mass demonstration with 0 arrests. That is actually impressive. And this was not just a big city thing. Almost half the protests took place in Republican strongholds. Texas had over 100 events. Florida had over 100. Idaho, Wyoming, Utah all had events. Small towns like Clarksville, Georgia, and Seward, Alaska had people in the streets. Now here is the thing. Whether you support these protests or think they are ridiculous depends on where you sit politically. And I get that. But here is what I want everyone to understand regardless of which side you are on. When 8 million Americans spend their Saturdays standing on a street corner, instead of watching basketball, something is happening. You do not have to agree with them, but you should pay attention to them. Because 8 million people do not show up for nothing. The White House dismissed it. A spokesperson called the protests, quote, Trump derangement therapy sessions. And look, I laughed at that. That is a good line. But laughing off 8 million people is like a restaurant owner laughing off 1,000 one-star reviews. At some point, maybe the food is the problem. More on this in the Growl. I have thoughts. Story number 2. And this one is going to hit your wallet harder than anything else we have talked about on this show. Oil hit $116 a barrel today. That is up over 60% since the war started on February 28th. Before the war, oil was around $73. Now it is $116. Gas at the pump just hit $3.99 nationally, and it is going higher. How much higher? Analysts at Macquarie Group said this week that if the war continues until June and the Strait of Hormuz stays shut, oil could hit $200 a barrel. That would mean $7 gas. Let me say that again. $7 gas. That is not a typo. That is a forecast from a major financial firm. Now here is where it gets wild. President Trump gave an interview to the Financial Times on Sunday and said his preference would be to, quote, take the oil in Iran. He specifically mentioned seizing Karg Island, which handles 90% of Iran's oil exports. He compared it to what the U.S. did in Venezuela earlier this year. Then this morning, Trump posted on Truth Social that if Iran does not reopen the Strait of Hormuz and agree to a deal soon, the U.S. will, quote, blow up and completely obliterate all of their electric generating plants, oil wells, and Karg Island, and possibly all desalination plants. Iran's response? Their parliament speaker said, quote, our men are waiting for American troops to enter on the ground, ready to unleash devastation upon them. Meanwhile, 3,500 more U.S. troops just arrived in the Middle East. Iran fired missiles at a U.S. airbase in Saudi Arabia on Friday, injuring 12 American troops, and Russia reportedly took satellite images of that base 3 times in the days before Iran attacked it. Ukraine's Zelensky shared that intelligence and said Russia was helping Iran target our troops. This is not a trade negotiation. This is not a tariff dispute. This is a shooting war. American soldiers are getting hurt, and the price you pay at the gas pump is a direct result of it. I will go deeper in pause and effect on what $7 gas would actually do to your daily life. Stay with me. Story number 3, and this one has been quietly building for months. Bank of America agreed to pay $72.5 million to settle a lawsuit brought by survivors of Jeffrey Epstein. The lawsuit alleged that the bank knowingly provided banking services to Epstein and his associates while ignoring, quote, obvious red flags about his trafficking operation. Here is a detail that should make your blood boil. The lawsuit said that billionaire Leon Black transferred $170 million to Epstein through his Bank of America account. $170 million. Supposedly for tax and estate planning advice. And the bank just looked the other way. Bank of America says they did nothing wrong. They made no admission of liability. But they are writing a check for $72 million anyway. Funny how that works. You did nothing wrong, but here is $72 million just because. This is now the 3rd major bank to pay out in Epstein cases. JP Morgan paid $290 million, Deutsche Bank paid $75 million, and now Bank of America for $72 million. That is over $430 million in settlements. From 3 banks, and not a single bank executive has been charged with a crime. Not one. I said this in episode 1. Nobody gets a pass on this show. Left or right. And when a bank enables a sex trafficker for years, and the punishment is a check that amounts to a rounding error on their balance sheet, that is not justice. That is a business expense, and we should all be growling about it. Pause and effect time. And today we are talking about the number that is going to define your summer, the price of gas. Let me show you what $7 gas would actually look like if it happens. Right now, gas is $3.99 a gallon nationally. That is already painful. A month ago, it was around $3. Before the war, it was under $3 in a lot of places, so it has already gone up $1 in a month. But let us talk about 7. The average American drives about 13,500 miles a year. That is roughly 260 miles a week. If your car gets 25 miles per gallon, you use about 10 gallons a week. At $3.99 a gallon, that is $40 a week. At $7, that is $70 a week. That is an extra $30 a week just to get to work. Over a year, that is an extra $1,560 out of your pocket just for commuting. But it is not just your car. Gas prices are like gravity. They pull everything else down with them. Groceries. Every single item on your grocery shelf was delivered by a truck that runs on diesel. Diesel has already spiked. When diesel goes up, shipping costs go up. When shipping costs go up, the store raises prices. That gallon of milk that costs $4 today, at $7 gas, analysts say it could be $6. That box of cereal goes from $5 to $7. Your grocery bill for a family of 4 could jump $150 to $200 a month. Amazon and online shopping. Same thing. Everything you order online gets delivered by a vehicle that burns fuel. Shipping costs will go up. Free shipping thresholds will go up. Delivery times will get longer because companies will consolidate shipments to save fuel. That 2-day Prime delivery might become 4-day delivery. Airlines. Jet fuel is the single biggest cost for any airline. When oil goes from 73 to 116, airlines eat some of that cost. When it goes to 200, they cannot eat it anymore. They pass it to you. Ticket prices for a domestic round trip that costs $350 today could easily hit $500 or $600 by summer. Some regional airlines might cut routes entirely. Heating and electricity. If you heat your home with oil or propane, you're going to feel this next winter in a big way. Natural gas prices tend to follow oil prices up. Your utility bill could jump 20 to 30%. And here is the ripple effect that nobody talks about. Small businesses. The pizza shop that delivers. The landscaper who drives a truck. The plumber who drives to your house. They all absorb fuel costs. And when they cannot absorb anymore, they raise prices or they cut staff. That is how high gas prices lead to layoffs. It is a chain reaction. So what do? Same advice I have been giving since episode 1. Get your car maintenance up to date. Properly inflated tires alone can save you 3% on fuel. Combine your errands instead of making 5 separate trips. Use GasBuddy to find the cheapest station. And if you can carpool or work from home even 1 day a week, do it. Every gallon you do not buy is money in your pocket. Now here is my take. I believe in American energy independence. We have the resources. We have the oil. We have the natural gas. We have the technology. The fact that a war on the other side of the world can double our gas prices in 30 days is a failure of energy policy. Not just this administration. Every administration for the last 30 years. We should not be this vulnerable. And until we fix that, every conflict in the Middle East is a tax on every American driver. That is the math. That is the reality. Plan accordingly. Time for the growl. And this week, I am going to say something that might surprise you. I want to talk about the 8 million people who protested on Saturday. Not whether they were right or wrong, but whether it matters. Here is what I have noticed in this country. We are really good at showing up. We are really good at marching. We are really good at making signs and posting photos and feeling like we did something. But what happens on Monday morning? What changes? What actually moves? 8 million people marched on Saturday. That is incredible. That is powerful. But I have a question. How many of those 8 million people voted in their last local election? How many know the name of their city council member? How many have called their representative's office even once? Because here is the uncomfortable truth. One phone call to your congressman's office on a Tuesday afternoon has more political impact than 1 day of marching on a Saturday. I am not saying protests are useless. They are not. They send a message. They build community. They show the world that people care. All of that matters. But a protest without follow-through is like going to the gym once and expecting to lose 20 pounds. It feels good. You took a photo, but nothing changed. And this goes for both sides. This is not a left thing or a right thing. Conservatives rally. Liberals march. Everybody posts online, but the people who actually change things are the people who show up on the boring days. The town hall meetings, the school board elections, the primary elections where nobody votes. That is where power actually lives. Not in the streets, in the systems. So here is my challenge. If you marched on Saturday, good. I respect that. Now do the hard part. Find out who your representative is. Call their office. Tell them what you want. Show up at the next local election. Because 8 million people in the streets on Saturday is a headline. 8 million people at the polls on Tuesday is a revolution. That is my growl. That is episode 3 of the Growl with Hank. We covered a lot today. Quick recap. 8 million Americans took to the streets in the largest single-day protest in U.S. history. Oil hit $116 a barrel, and gas is knocking on $4, with $7 possible by summer if the war continues. Trump said he wants to take the oil in Iran and threatened to obliterate their energy infrastructure. Bank of America is paying $72 million to Epstein survivors, making it the third major bank to settle. And if you marched on Saturday, the real work starts on Monday. If this episode hit home, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear the news explained without the spin. Subscribe so you never miss a Tuesday. I am Hank Brewski. This is The Growl. Stay sharp, stay free, and I will see you next Tuesday.